Hello, and welcome back to Sleepy Hollow Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered from the mists of Sleepy Hollow, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. There isn't much to say, and I've gone back and forth about even writing this down, because once you put something into words, it starts to feel more real. But it's been sitting on my chest for days, and I can't shake it, so I'm going to tell it the way it happened. I moved to North Carolina in 2025 to take care of my grandfather. He lived just outside of Greensboro on about 50 acres of land that had been in our family for generations. It wasn't some beautiful, well-kept property like you see in real estate listings. It was mostly fields, woods, and fences that always needed repair. The house was small and old, and it was attached to what used to be a working farm. Now, it was more like a farm that was slowly giving up. A few animals, some equipment that should have been replaced years ago, and buildings that creaked and leaned and looked tired. My grandfather still called it home like it was the best place on earth. I got the call in November. It wasn't a dramatic emergency where someone yelled into the phone or an ambulance was already there. It was more unsettling than that, because it was quiet and confused. I was told that on a random night, my grandfather had just stopped talking. He didn't fall or hit his head. He didn't have some obvious stroke signs that everyone recognized right away. He just went silent, like something inside him had flipped off. He could still move around, still look at you, still do small things, but he wouldn't speak. The doctor said it could be a lot of things. Stress, age, something neurological. They said it was safest if someone stayed with him, helped around the property, made sure he ate, made sure he took medication, made sure he didn't wander or hurt himself without being able to explain what was wrong. At the time, my own life was in pieces. I had just come out of a bad breakup that had left me feeling embarrassed and angry and exhausted. I couldn't stand being in my apartment with all the reminders. I couldn't stand friends asking if I was okay. I wanted a reason to disappear for a while, and taking care of my grandfather felt like the most solid reason a person could have. It wasn't running away. It was doing the right thing. So I packed what I could, drove down, and moved into his house. For the first few months, things were quiet in a way that almost felt healing. The days had a simple rhythm. You wake up, you check on him. You make breakfast, you do chores, you repair something, you cook, you clean. In the evenings, you sit on the porch and listen to the bugs in the wind and the distant sounds of things moving in the trees. My grandfather didn't talk, but he wasn't completely gone either. He'd look at you like he understood. Sometimes he'd nod. Sometimes he'd point. If I put on an old show he used to like, he'd sit in his chair and watch as if it still meant something to him. It was sad, but it was manageable. The property itself was a lot of work, but it was the kind of work that keeps your mind busy. There were pigs in their pen, a couple of other animals, and a barn that held tools, feed, and the leftovers of better years. The barn was big, painted red a long time ago. It stood a short walk from the house, out in the open with the yard stretching between them. On warmer nights, we'd leave the big doors propped open for air. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar, like it had always been there, and always would be. Nothing happened for a long time. No strange lights, no footsteps, no scary stories, just routine. That was true until last week. It started on a night that felt completely normal. I'd finished the chores around the house the way I always did. I'd checked the animals, locked what needed locking, made sure the porch light was on, and gotten my grandfather settled. He was in his room, and I was thinking about getting some sleep myself. I remember feeling tired in that deep, heavy way you feel after doing physical work all day, the kind of tired that makes your bed sound like the best thing in the world. Then a loud bang cracked through the air from outside. It wasn't a soft bump or the sound of something settling. It was sharp, like wood slamming or metal hitting metal. The noise was loud enough that it made my heart jump. My first thought wasn't monster or intruder. It was simple and practical. The pigs had forced their gate open again. They'd done it before. They were strong, and they pushed at things when they got restless. I didn't stop to think. I sprinted out the front door. The cold evening air hit me in the face and made me slow down. For a second, I just stood there on the porch, breathing hard, trying to get my eyes to adjust. The field in front of me looked normal. No animals loose, no shapes moving through the grass. The pig pen looked shut from where I stood. The fence line was still. Nothing looked like a disaster. That's when my eyes drifted toward the barn. The big red doors were shut. That alone didn't sound terrifying on paper, but it was wrong. Those doors were heavy, and we didn't close them at night, unless there was a reason. Usually they stayed propped open, especially on warmer nights. Even on colder nights, I didn't always bother unless rain was coming. Seeing them closed felt like seeing a chair turned toward you in an empty room. It suggested intent, like someone had done it on purpose. I turned on my phone's flashlight and started walking toward the barn. I told myself I'd just reopen the doors, check that nothing had fallen over, and go back inside. That was the plan. Simple, quick. Then, sleep. But the closer I got, the more something felt off in a way I couldn't explain. The night was quiet, not peaceful quiet, not the normal quiet of a rural area where you still hear bugs and wind and distant animal sounds. It was quiet like someone had shut the world down. I stopped walking for a second and listened. The drone of cicadas that normally filled the darkness was gone. It was like the sound had been cut. The wind wasn't moving either. We had metal chimes hanging on the porch that usually made at least a soft clink when the air shifted. When I glanced back, they were perfectly still. No movement at all. It wasn't just calm. It felt smothered, like the air itself was being held in place. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was alone. It was late. I'd been stressed lately. Of course my brain would make normal things feel weird. That's what brains do when they're tired. I forced myself forward. With every step, my shoes felt heavier, like the ground didn't want me walking out there. I know how dramatic that sounds. It wasn't like I physically couldn't move. It was more like my body was trying to argue with my mind. Every instinct was saying, turn around, go back inside, lock the door. But I kept going, because I didn't want to be the kind of person who lets fear run their life, especially fear over something that probably had a simple explanation. When I reached the barn, I grabbed the doors and pulled. The wood groaned as it moved, that long, complaining sound old buildings make when they've been sitting in one position too long. I braced myself without even knowing what I was bracing for. A raccoon, a possum, a broken tool, anything. My flashlight swept across the floor. Empty stalls, tools hanging on the walls, feed bags where they should be. Dust, nothing out of place. No animals, no stranger hiding behind a beam. It looked exactly like it always did. Relief hit me so hard it made me almost dizzy. I propped the doors open again and stood there a second, breathing, letting my shoulders loosen. I felt foolish, and I was glad to feel foolish. Being wrong is a gift sometimes. I won't lie, though. I jogged a little on my way back to the house. Not full-on running, but faster than walking, like I wanted the barn behind me. A few minutes later, I was inside, the door locked, and I was in bed. I remember thinking that whatever caused the bang was probably something falling over in the barn, maybe a tool shifting, maybe a board snapping, and I promised myself I'd check it properly in daylight. Then I started drifting off. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up again. At first I thought I was dreaming, that hazy half-awake feeling where you're not sure if you heard something or imagined it. But then I heard it clearly. A faint scratching sound against my bedroom window. There was a massive oak tree outside my room, and its branches sometimes scraped the glass when the wind was strong. That's what I assumed it was. I even started to relax, because at least that explanation made sense. Then I heard my grandfather's voice from outside. "Come outside, champ." My entire body went cold. I don't mean I got scared. I mean it felt like the temperature dropped under my skin. My throat tightened so fast I couldn't speak, like my body was trying to make sure I didn't make a sound. No one called me champ. Not anymore. Not in years. The only person who ever called me that was my grandfather, and hearing it in the dark, outside my window, felt like someone had reached into my past and pulled out a piece of it, just to mess with me. For one stupid second, I almost answered. It was pure reflex, like being a kid again and hearing your name called from the other room. Then reality slammed back in. My grandfather was inside the house. He was in bed. He hadn't spoken in months. The voice came again, more insistent. But now that my brain was listening closely, something about it sounded wrong. Not like a sick man calling for help. It sounded thin and warped, like a recording that had been copied too many times until the edges got damaged. "Come outside." I sat straight up in bed. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the blanket just to feel like I was holding on to something real. Every instinct in my body told me not to look. If you've ever had that feeling, you know what I mean. The sense that the moment you look, something will look back, and you won't be able to pretend it isn't there anymore. I looked anyway. My eyes went past the oak tree, past the yard, straight to the barn. The barn's interior light was on. A pale yellow glow spilled out into the darkness like a stain. I knew I'd turned that light off earlier. I knew I had. I remembered walking out of there with my phone light, seeing the empty stalls, propping the doors open, and leaving. That light being on was wrong in the simplest, most undeniable way. And just outside that light, standing where the brightness faded into shadow, there was something tall. It was shaped wrong, like a person stretched too far. It didn't stand with a normal posture. It leaned slightly, like it was listening, like it was waiting for something. At first it was hard to see because it stayed just outside the full light, but the longer I stared, the more details came into focus. Its hands were down at its sides, and long, narrow claws hung from them. Not nails. Claws. Thin and curved, and too long to belong to anything that should be walking around on two legs. Even from where I was, I could tell they were massive. Easily 10 inches. Maybe more. Its body looked uneven. Patches of gray, matted fur clung to parts of it, like an animal that had been rolling in mud and then left to dry. But it wasn't built like a bear or a coyote. It was upright. It had the outline of something that wanted to look human, but couldn't quite manage it. It leaned a little more into the light. And then it opened its mouth. I saw jaws part in a way that made my stomach flip. Too wide. Too empty. And when it spoke, it used my grandfather's voice. "Champ. I need some help." The imitation was perfect in tone, perfect in rhythm, and that somehow made it worse. There was no warmth in it, no life. It sounded like someone repeating a line they'd practiced, like they didn't understand what the words meant. like they were wearing his voice the way you might wear a mask. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just dove under my blankets like a child hiding from something in the closet. I pulled the covers over my head and pressed my face into the pillow, trying to make myself small, trying to make myself disappear. My heart was slamming so hard I thought it would give me away. I kept waiting for the sound of footsteps on the porch, for the back door to rattle, for the window to shatter. But the only thing that continued was the scratching on the glass. Slow, patient, like it had all night. I stayed like that for what felt like hours. I don't know if I prayed. I don't know if I even breathed normally. I just stayed under the covers, sweating and freezing at the same time, listening to that scratching and to the silence around it. At some point, exhaustion pulled me down. Sleep took me the way it sometimes takes you when you're terrified, not like comfort, but like your body shutting off because it can't stay on anymore. Morning came. The house looked normal in daylight. That made it feel even worse, like the night had been something that happened in a different world and I had been dropped back into this one. I got up slowly, almost expecting to see scratches on the inside of my window, or mud on the floor, or some obvious proof that I hadn't imagined it. I checked the window. Nothing. I checked the front door locks, the back door locks. Everything seemed fine. I went to my grandfather's room. He was still in bed. Still. Quiet. Sometime later, I called for help. I won't go into every detail of that part, because it's the normal kind of awful, the kind of awful people understand. The first responders came. They checked him. They said it looked like he'd passed in his sleep, likely from a heart attack. They estimated it happened sometime around 3 a.m. 3 a.m. That number hit me like another bang in the night, because I knew I'd been awake around then, hiding under blankets, listening to something scratch at my window while wearing my grandfather's voice. I couldn't stop thinking about the timing, about the way it called me champ, about the way it asked for help, about the barn light, about how it stood right at the edge of the glow like it didn't want to be fully seen, like it wanted me to come closer. After everything that day, after the calls and the paperwork and the awful quiet of the house without him, I thought maybe it would stop. I thought maybe whatever it was had been tied to him somehow, to his life, to his last night. But I was wrong. I'm in charge of the farm now. That part, strangely, hasn't been as hard as I expected. The work is steady. The animals still need care. The fences still need fixing. The land doesn't pause for grief. During the day, I can almost convince myself that night was a stress dream, that my mind mixed branches, scraping the window with my fear of losing him. Then the sun goes down. The air gets still again, and the property gets quiet, and I start listening for sounds without meaning to. Every creak makes me tense. Every shift of wind makes me look toward the tree. And some nights, once it's fully dark, I hear his voice outside again. Not from inside the house. Not from a memory. From outside, near the yard, like someone is standing just far enough away that I can't see them clearly. Come outside, champ. Sometimes it says it gently, like it's trying to be convincing. Sometimes it sounds damaged, like that same warped recording. And every time I hear it, the same feeling comes back. Not just fear, but the certainty that whatever is out there isn't lost or confused. It knows what it's doing. It knows what name will make me sit up. It knows what voice will make me almost answer before I can stop myself. I haven't gone outside when it calls. I don't plan to. I keep the doors locked. I keep the blinds closed. I keep lights on in rooms I'm not even in, just so there aren't any dark corners. But I can't stop thinking about that night, about the barn doors being shut, about the cicadas going silent, about the barn light turning on by itself, and that tall shape standing just outside it. And I can't stop thinking about the fact that my grandfather died around the same time it was scratching at my window, using his voice, asking me for help. If it wanted me outside, it didn't just want company. It wanted access. Story 2. I was still a child the first time I stepped onto that boat, and when I think about it now, the shame comes back like it happened yesterday. I don't know what made me do it. I can try to dress it up as curiosity, or boredom, or some childish need to prove I wasn't scared of anything, but the truth is, I don't understand it. I only remember a whisper. Soft. Pretty. In a strange way. Like someone speaking right next to your ear without breathing on you. I can still hear it sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet. And I don't know if it's real, or if my mind just kept a copy of it, because it never found a way to let it go. I was young. That part is clear. I was near the docks, too, and I wasn't supposed to be there. My mother hated the docks. She talked about them the way people talk about a sickness in a town, like the place itself could infect you. She said the docks were full of con men and drunks and ill folk, her word for anyone she didn't trust. She warned me again and again. She scolded. She punished. She tried every way she knew to make me afraid of that place. It didn't work. If anything, it did the opposite. I was the kind of kid who took rules like a challenge. When I felt trapped, defying her made me feel like I had a little control over my own life. Looking back, it wasn't brave. It was just stubborn, and the docks were the easiest way to prove to myself that I could do what I wanted. I wasn't alone that day. I was with friends, I'm sure of that, but their names won't come to me now. I've tried to remember them. I've tried to picture their faces. All I get are blank spaces, like the years rubbed the details off them. I think we were playing hide and seek. That's what makes sense. Running between stacks of crates, slipping around corners, ducking behind barrels, laughing and trying not to get caught. Whether I was hiding or seeking doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the whisper. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It didn't sound like someone calling from across the dock. It was closer than that, like it had crawled into the space right beside me. I couldn't make out the words at first, but the sound was gentle and annoying at the same time, like a song you almost like but can't get out of your head. It was the kind of sound that makes you turn your head even when you know you shouldn't. I followed it. I pushed through crowds, bumped shoulders, slipped between people, and stumbled over loose boards that rocked under my feet. I remember the smell of fish and salt and wet wood. I remember men shouting to each other, ropes creaking, gulls crying above. I remember that feeling of slipping deeper into a place where no one was watching me anymore. The whisper kept pulling, and I kept going, focused on it like it was the only thing that mattered. Eventually, I found the source. It was a small fishing boat, smaller than anything else tied up there. It looked pathetic compared to the bigger boats, like it didn't belong. The paint was faded. The wood looked swollen from water and age. It sat low in the water, as if it was already tired of floating, and the whisper was louder near it. Not louder like someone was yelling, but clearer, more present. It was a rougher sound now, like the same voice had been used too much. The wind picked up at the same time, pushing at my back, nudging me closer. It felt like the air itself wanted me on that boat, like it had decided for me. I remember hesitating. I remember my mind trying to pull me back, reminding me of my mother, reminding me that I was doing something stupid. But I stepped aboard anyway. The moment both my feet were on the deck, the whisper stopped, just like that, like someone had switched it off. For a few seconds, I stood there in silence, waiting for it to start again, almost expecting it. I remember how the quiet made me feel exposed, like I had walked somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and the world had noticed. Then I started walking around, looking at everything, trying to convince myself it was just a boat. I told myself I'd climbed on, looked around, and that would be the end of it. The smell hit me first. Mildew, strong enough to make my nose sting. Under it, though, there was something sweet, like perfume sprayed too heavily. The two smells fought each other in the air, and together they made my stomach turn. The deck was damp. Seawater seeped up through cracks in the wood in places, and other parts were patched in a messy way that looked like someone had fixed it quickly and badly. I remember feeling disappointed. After all that whispering, after being pulled there like it mattered, it was just a ruined little boat. I turned to get off. I was about to take the last step back onto the dock when the boat suddenly rocked hard beneath me. It wasn't a gentle sway like a normal boat. It jerked and tipped like something had hit it from underneath. I reached for something to grab, but there was nothing close enough. My feet slid. I fell onto the deck, and my head struck wood. The world went out. I don't know how long I was unconscious. I don't remember any dreams. I don't remember any voices. Just black, and then the feeling of waking up with my body heavy and my head aching. When I opened my eyes, it was dark. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. I thought maybe I'd woken up at night on the dock and everyone had gone home. I thought maybe I'd be in trouble, and the fear of my mother's anger came rushing in. I sat up slowly, dizzy, and realized I was still on the boat. It felt like a miracle I hadn't fallen face first into the water and drowned. Even now, that part doesn't make sense. A child knocked unconscious on a wet deck should have rolled the wrong way. But I didn't. I woke up lying there, soaked, sore, alive. I sat there for a minute thinking about my mother, and I had this ridiculous thought that I could just stay there forever and never go back. I was a kid, and I was afraid of her yelling, and the idea of hiding from it seemed almost comforting. I would give anything to go back and take her yelling over what came next. I stood up. Then I sat back down so fast it felt like my legs had given out. I stood again, blinking hard, and looked around with wide, confused eyes. Then I dropped back to the deck again, because my mind couldn't accept what my eyes were telling it. I squeezed my eyes shut until it hurt. I clenched my fists. I thought I was still dreaming, that I hadn't really woken up, that my brain was playing a cruel trick. I scooped up water from the deck and threw it in my face. Cold. Real. I shook my head hard, like that could shake the image loose. Then I opened my eyes again and stood up with my heart pounding. The boat was not at the docks. It wasn't even on the ocean. It looked like it was sitting on the surface of the moon. I know how that sounds. I know how impossible it is. I've lived long enough to understand what the moon is, what space is, what it means to be there without protection. I understand how ridiculous it is to say a broken little fishing boat carried a child to the moon and left him breathing on a wet deck. And yet, in my memory, that is exactly what happened. The ground around me was gray and pale. The surface was full of craters and holes like scars, like something had beaten it over and over. The air felt thin and empty and cold, and there was a silence so complete it felt like pressure in my ears. I stepped off the boat, and the moment my foot touched the ground, my body felt lighter. Not just a little lighter. Light, like I could float. I drifted down as if gravity had loosened its grip. I remember laughing, surprised, because my fear couldn't find a place to land. I took a few more steps, slow and careful, and I began to enjoy it. My feet made soft impacts. My body moved like it was underwater. Each movement felt like a new trick. Soon I wasn't just walking. I was hopping. Then I was jumping. I leapt higher than I ever could on Earth. My laughter bounced off the empty space and came back to me, and it felt like the whole place was laughing with me. I picked up rocks and threw them, watching them drift down slowly, and I was amazed by how gentle everything was. I thought about cartwheels. I thought about handstands. I felt free in a way I had never felt before, like nothing could hurt me here, like rules didn't apply. Even now, even knowing that night was the beginning of everything that ruined me, I can admit that part was beautiful. For a short time, I felt unstoppable. But children get bored fast. Eventually, the excitement faded. My laughter died out. The cold hit me. The emptiness stopped being fun and started being lonely. Thoughts of home came back like a wave. My mother, my friends, the morning, school. I wondered if I was going to be late. I wondered if anyone would find me. I wondered if they were looking for me right then. I know I cried. I don't remember the exact sound, but I know the feeling. A tight chest, burning eyes, the sudden need for comfort. I climbed back onto the boat and sat on the soaked deck, leaning against a creaky board. I stared ahead, waiting for the boat to move again. I didn't know how it had gotten there, but I believed it had to go back. I told myself I couldn't be stranded. My mother wouldn't allow it. That was how my child mind worked, as if my mother's will could reach across space and pull me home. I must have fallen asleep. I woke up to shouting and laughter, the sound of people, the heat of the sun. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming, but when I sat up and blinked, I saw the docks, the water, the boats, the world I knew. I was home. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried again. Then, almost immediately, something felt wrong. The dock looked similar, but not the same. The boards looked older. Some buildings in the distance looked different. The colors seemed off, like the whole place had been repainted in the time I was gone. When I stood up, the ground seemed farther away than I expected. I remember yawning, and I was startled by the sound of my own voice. Deeper, strange, like it didn't belong to me. I didn't stop to think. My only thought was my mother. I jumped off the boat and ran, furious at it, terrified of what I'd face at home, already building excuses in my head. I told myself I'd say older boys chased me and I hid. I told myself she'd be too relieved to be angry. As I ran through town, more little things felt wrong. The streets were familiar, but the details didn't match. Some shops looked newer. Some signs were gone. I convinced myself I was just noticing things differently because I was tired. When I got to my house, I slowed down. The grass was taller. The fence looked rougher. The house itself looked more worn, like it had lived through too many seasons. But it was still my house. I could feel that. I didn't want to think too hard about what I was seeing. I knocked. 3 times. No, 4. I waited. I knocked 4 more times because I wanted it to sound urgent, like I hadn't just wandered off. Footsteps came from inside. The door opened, and an older woman stood there. She looked like my mother in the way old photographs look like the real person. The same face, but changed by time. Lines around her eyes, gray in her hair. Her posture different, heavier. For a second, my mind refused to accept it. It couldn't be her, because my mother wasn't old. And then, something else hit me. I could see over the top of her head. My mother had always seemed tall to me. Now, I was looking down at her. She stared at me like she was trying to decide if she was awake. I started to speak, to apologize, to tell her I was sorry, to explain that I must have the wrong house. Anything to make it make sense. Before I could finish, her eyes widened. She reached out and grabbed my face. Her hands moved over my cheeks and my forehead like she was checking for scars, like she was trying to prove something to herself. I stumbled backward, shocked and angry and confused, thinking she was a stranger acting insane. Then she started crying, and she said my name. She said it like it was painful, like it was impossible. She stepped forward again, and this time her hands were gentle as she held my face and looked straight into my eyes. She said my name again, as if speaking it could bring the world back into place. My mother was saying my name. My mother was old. I was only gone for one night. I knew it. I knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. One night. One evening, one sleep, one morning. That was all. But her face told a different story. And then the thought came that made me feel sick. If she had changed, what about me? I pushed past her and ran into the house. I heard her shouting behind me, a desperate shaking sound. I ran straight to the washroom and stared into the mirror. A man stared back. Not a teenage boy, not a slightly older version of me, a full-grown man, a stranger with my eyes. I don't remember the exact moment I understood it, because my mind didn't want to hold it. I remember my mother holding me while I sat there, staring, numb, like my brain had shut down to survive. I remember days afterward where I barely spoke. I remember lying in bed and listening to the house, trying to convince myself I would wake up as a child again. I never told her what happened. Not really. How could I? Even if I said the words, she wouldn't understand. And I think she didn't want to understand. She wanted her son back, in whatever form she could get. Even if I came back broken, hollowed out, wrong, my being there was enough for her, even if it hurt. I moved through life like a shell. I ate little. I answered questions with nods. Some days I walked into town without a plan, just wandering as if I could find my childhood sitting on a street corner waiting for me. I saw faces that were too old and not old enough at the same time. People I recognized only after staring too long. My friends had grown up. Some had families. Some had jobs. They looked at me like I was a ghost. And inside me, something started to burn. I needed someone to blame. Something to fight. I couldn't fight time, so I fought the boat. That cursed little fishing boat that had stolen years like they were nothing. One night, when the rage finally felt stronger than my fear, I went back to the docks. The whisper came again the moment I arrived, like it had been waiting for me. Soft, irritating, sweet. It hooked into my ear and pulled me through the crowd exactly the way it had when I was a child. And there it was, the same small boat, the same rotten wood, the same dampness. It looked unchanged, as if time had refused to touch it. I stood there glaring at it. Then I jumped aboard. This time I told myself I would stay awake. I wouldn't fall. I wouldn't let it knock me unconscious again. I stood and grabbed the nearest solid thing, gripping so hard my fingers hurt. The boat began to rock, gently at first, like it was testing me. The water beneath it started to bubble and churn, and the rocking got faster. I tasted salt as spray hit my mouth. I tried to shield my eyes. Then the boat dropped. Not drifted, not sank slowly. It plummeted. It happened so fast I couldn't even scream. My stomach lifted into my throat. My body rose slightly off the deck, held in place only by my grip, and then the world turned into a deep, heavy black. No stars, no moonlight, just darkness, like ink. With my vision gone, my fear grew teeth. I thought I was going to die right there. I thought the boat was dragging me to the bottom of the ocean to punish me for coming back. But then, the descent slowed. The rocking eased. The pressure in my body changed. I lost my grip and fell onto the deck. I lay there trembling, and that's when I realized something that made no sense at all. I could still breathe. There was air. Cold, damp air, but air. If we were deep underwater, I should have been drowning. But I wasn't. I was breathing in the darkness, surrounded by silence so thick it felt alive. I stayed there, barely moving, too afraid to stand. Minutes passed. The silence didn't stay silent, though. A low hum started, steady and deep, like a distant engine or a huge drum being tapped again and again. It got inside my head. It made my teeth feel strange. It made time feel stretched and wrong. Then a light appeared outside the boat, a small blue glow, soft as a candle seen through fog. Then another, then many. Little lights appeared all around, floating in the darkness, like drifting spirits. They gave me just enough visibility to see that the boat seemed to be inside a kind of bubble, like a clear wall around it, separating it from whatever was outside. And outside that bubble, shapes moved. I heard groans and chirps, strange noises that didn't belong to any animal I knew. And then creatures began to swim into view, circling the boat in slow, graceful patterns. They were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. They glowed in cool blues and reds and oranges and purples, lighting up the dark water around them. Their bodies had shapes that didn't fit the rules of fish or mammals. Some were long and ribbon-like. Some were wide and pulsing. Some looked almost see-through, as if you could see their bones or organs shining faintly inside them. Huge ones passed by, and the boat shook from the force of them, but I couldn't stop staring. For a moment, I forgot my anger. I forgot my fear. I was just a human being witnessing something that felt older than the world. Then I remembered why I had come. I forced myself to move, to search the boat. I tore through it like a desperate man. I opened every barrel. I threw aside every tarp. I searched above deck and below, ran my hands along boards, tried to peel up decayed wood, looking for some mechanism, some hidden lever, some sign that the boat wasn't what it pretended to be. There was nothing. It was just a fishing boat. A small, damp, rotten thing with no obvious secret. As my search slowed and my hope started to die, the glowing creatures drifted away, one by one fading back into the dark. It felt like the boat was watching me, like it understood my purpose, and once it knew I had failed to find anything, it cut the show short. The lights vanished. Darkness returned. The hum remained. I sank onto the wet deck and hugged my knees. I laughed once, a small, ugly sound, because the situation was so absurd it almost felt like a joke. That laugh broke into sobbing. The sobbing turned into a choking cry that made my throat ache. Eventually, I forced myself to stop, because there was no point. The silence sat beside me like a patient enemy. I lay on my side, tears mixing with seawater until I couldn't tell them apart. I closed my eyes. Sleep came whether I wanted it or not. When I woke again, I was back at the docks under a bright sun, soaked and stiff. I lay there for a long time, staring up at the sky, feeling defeated. I listened to the sounds of people nearby, normal life continuing around me, as if I hadn't just fallen through reality and crawled back. When I finally sat up, I scratched my face and felt hair there. More than before. Coarser. I didn't need a mirror to know what that meant. More years had been taken. I stepped off the boat slowly, cursing it, and walked through town like someone walking through a dream that didn't belong to them. I looked at buildings and faces, trying to measure what time had done while I was gone. The number of unfamiliar people was overwhelming, and the worst part was that some faces might have been familiar, only changed by time until they didn't fit my memory anymore. When I reached my home, I stopped in front of it, unable to knock right away. It looked like the same place, only a little more tired. How many years had it been? How many times could my mother survive losing me? I knocked once, twice, 3 times. I waited. No answer. I didn't knock again. I turned to leave because I couldn't face it. And at that exact moment, the door swung open. A man stood there, older with tired eyes that held something like recognition. There was the smallest hint of a smile at first, and then it disappeared. I asked if he had seen my mother. The moment the words came out, his expression changed. The softness left him. Something hard took its place. He stepped outside and shut the door quietly behind him, like he didn't want anyone inside to hear. He stared at me the way you stare at someone you hate for reasons too deep to explain. Then he told me what my mother had lived through. He told me she lost my father not long after I was born. Then she lost me when I was a child. He said she was destroyed by it, the kind of grief that doesn't heal because it keeps feeding on itself. And then, years later, I came back. Not a child, but a man. Broken, silent, empty. But I was still her son, and she clung to that like it was oxygen, even on the days I barely ate, even on the days I didn't speak, even when I wandered like a ghost through her house. My presence was enough. Then I disappeared again. No, he corrected himself. I left. He made sure to put weight on that word like it was a crime, like I had chosen it. He told me it had taken years for my mother to smile again after the second loss. Years for her to stop looking at doors and expecting them to open. Years for her to find any peace at all. He said she had finally moved on. She had finally found a way to live without tearing herself apart every day. And he told me if I came back again, I would ruin what little peace she had managed to build. He wasn't gentle. He threatened me. He didn't care about my story. He didn't want explanations. He only cared about her. And in his eyes, I was the thing that kept coming back to reopen the wound. I stood there and listened, and I didn't fight him. What could I say? That a boat stole my life? That I hadn't chosen any of it? To him, it didn't matter. The result was the same. I came, I vanished, I came again, I vanished again. A pattern of hope and loss that tore a woman apart. When he finished, I nodded. I turned away. I walked back into town with nowhere to go. I ended up in a damp alley, leaning against a wall among trash and dirt and small rodents that scattered when I moved. And I remember thinking that it fit. I didn't feel like a full person anymore. I felt like something left over, something that belonged in the cracks between places. The anger didn't leave, though. It just changed shape. It mixed with grief until it became something new and sharp. The boat had done this. The boat had taken my childhood, my mother's life, my chance to be normal. It had taken years like they were pennies. It had to pay. Even if I couldn't get my time back, I could at least destroy it. I could at least make sure it couldn't do it to anyone else. That night, I broke into a shop and stole oil and candles. I didn't care about consequences. Jail sounded almost peaceful compared to what I had already lived through. I ran to the docks with the oil sloshing and my breath burning in my chest. I expected the whisper to come back and guide me. It didn't. It was silent. For the first time, it was as if the boat didn't want to call me, as if it knew why I was there. I found it anyway. I didn't hesitate. I jumped aboard and poured oil across the deck, over the boards, into every corner I could reach. I used what I had, making sure it soaked into the old wood. When I was satisfied, I stepped back onto the dock and threw the lit candle. Flames roared up fast. The fire climbed the boat like it had been starving. Heat slapped my face. The sound was huge, crackling, and hungry. For a moment, I felt something close to joy. I watched without shielding my eyes, letting the heat sting, because I wanted to witness it suffer. I wanted to see it burn. But when the flames died down, the boat was still there, untouched. It looked exactly the same as before, as if the fire had been a story told nearby and not something that had wrapped around it. The boards weren't blackened. The ropes weren't ash. The sail wasn't gone. It was impossible. And then the boat creaked and rocked gently against the dock, and the sound made my skin crawl because it almost sounded like laughter. I screamed. I jumped back onto it, determined to smash it apart with my bare hands if I had to. The moment my feet hit the deck, the boat shot upward into the air. The force threw me down, pinning me like a giant hand had slapped me flat. I choked on stale seawater that pooled on the wood. I tried to move, but my body felt pressed down by something invisible. I clenched my teeth until my jaw hurt. I couldn't believe I had done it again. I couldn't believe I had stepped onto it again. A cold, heavy wind slammed into my face as the boat raced through the stars. This time there was no wonder, no childlike joy, only rage and regret. All around me were specks of light, more than I could ever count. The stars I used to stare at from my yard looked no bigger out there. If anything, they looked smaller, because I could finally understand how far away they truly were. People call space a void, and for the first time I understood what they meant. Not because there was nothing, but because it felt like loneliness had become a place you could travel through. I held on to the railing until splinters dug into my hands. When I finally loosened my grip, my palms were bleeding. I wiped them on my soaked shirt and barely felt the sting. I was too tired for pain. I fell down and stared into the shallow water on the deck at my reflection. At the FaceTime had turned into something I didn't recognize. I closed my eyes and waited for sleep, because sleep was the only part of this that still happened like it was supposed to. When I woke, the sun was beating down on me again, and my body felt like it belonged to someone much older. My bones cracked when I moved. My muscles ached in deep, sharp ways. I looked down at my hands and saw wrinkles, spots, skin that sagged. When I tried to stand, I failed and hit the ground with a groan. And then I heard voices. Children's voices. Quick footsteps. Shocked laughter that turned into nervous silence. My heart flipped in my chest, not because I wanted their help, but because I knew what they were about to do. I could picture it perfectly. Curious kids near the docks, a small boat that looks harmless, the temptation of stepping aboard. I couldn't let it happen. I screamed at them with my broken, hoarse voice. I cursed. I flailed on the ground like a madman, throwing any words I could find at them, trying to scare them away. They squealed and ran, terrified of the sight of an old man thrashing and shouting. A few older men came toward me, probably drawn by the noise. I screamed at them too, warning them not to step on the boat, telling them to leave it alone. I threw water and whatever I could grab. They didn't listen. They thought I was drunk or crazy. They grabbed me anyway, not rough, but firm, the way you handle someone who might hurt themselves. They dragged me away from the boat. I fought them with everything I had, because I believed that if I could just keep them there, keep them focused on me, maybe no one would step on that deck. They were too kind to hit me, too strong for me to get free. They brought me into a nearby bar. Inside, the world smelled like alcohol and sweat and food. One of the men argued quietly with the bartender, and then they led me to a back room. They gave me fresh clothes and sandals. When I was alone, I changed slowly, each movement making my body complain. In the corner was a mirror. I shuffled to it and stared. I looked like a withered version of myself, skin hanging loose, eyes sunk deep with exhaustion, a body that had been aged like paper, left too long in the sun. I wanted to smash the mirror, but I knew it would only hurt my hands more. When I came back out, the two men were waiting. The bartender set down a plate of food and a glass of water. They asked questions. Where was I from? Did I have family? Was I hurt? Did I need help? I ate without really tasting it. I nodded when I needed to. I grunted when I couldn't find words. When I finished, I drank the water in one long swallow and felt it cool my throat. I thanked them because they didn't deserve my anger, and I stood up to leave. One of them tried to stop me, worried, but the bartender put a hand on his shoulder and held him back, as if he understood that some people can't be saved by force. Outside, I walked the streets of what I knew was my town, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The layout was wrong. The buildings were different. The faces were strange. It felt like walking through a place built on top of my memories. I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't ask for directions. I knew where I was going, the only place I was sure I could find: the cemetery. I knew exactly where my father's grave was. As a boy, I had visited it with my mother enough times that the path lived in my bones, and I knew she would be buried beside him. People do that. They plan to rest together. Even when life doesn't give them much else, they choose that. When I found her grave marker, I sat down slowly, crossing my legs with a grunt and a wince. For a moment, I couldn't cry. I just stared at the stone and picked at the grass like a child again, doing something small because the big feelings were too heavy to touch. Then I started talking. I told my mother a lie, because the truth was poison and I couldn't bring myself to spill it onto her resting place. I told her I ran away to the city and got a job in a nice office. I told her I met a few girls before I found the one. I told her I married her. I told her we bought a house. I told her we had 3 children and a dog. I told her my kids grew up and brought their own kids to see me. I told her my wife died and our family cried together and got through it. I told her I was only stopping by to say hello before heading back home because my eldest son and his wife were going on vacation and I had to babysit the grandchildren. The story grew as I spoke, like I could build a whole life out of words if I stacked them high enough. And as I got near the end, my voice broke and the sobbing finally came. Deep and ugly and unstoppable. I told her I missed her. I told her I was sorry. And in the back of my mind, under every word, was the sound of that soft whisper from the docks, waiting for the next child to listen. Story 3. I need to ask you something first, because you won't understand what I'm about to tell you unless you think about it the right way. Is an object defined by what it was meant to do, or is its purpose decided by whoever uses it? Picture something simple. A fork. Everyone's used a fork. It's made for eating, obviously. Eggs, chicken, vegetables, whatever you want. But could you use it to open a letter? Probably. Most people wouldn't, because we have letter openers and scissors and knives, and a fork isn't the first thing you'd reach for. Still, if the only thing near you is a fork, it would work. So what does that mean? Is the fork always going to be an eating tool because that's what it was designed for? Or does the moment you use it to open a letter give it a new purpose? It sounds like word games, I know, but I'm not saying it just to sound clever. I'm saying it because it matters. Because once you start thinking like that, you start noticing other things. If you believe an object is defined by its intended purpose, then you can learn a lot about something bigger by looking at the objects that make it up. A door is made to let people in. It's not made to keep people out. If you want to keep people out, you build a wall. A roof isn't there to protect you from someone breaking in. It's there to protect you from weather. Windows aren't made to observe from a distance. They're made to let in light and air and to let you see out if you want to. So if a house is missing one of these parts, what does that say about it? If it has no windows, does it not want to be seen? If it has no roof, does it not care about being protected? And if it has no doors, what does that mean? Maybe it means it does not want to be entered at all. You can call me Z. I'm not putting my real name online. But I will tell you this. There is a house in the middle of nowhere with no doors, and I've been inside it. I didn't go looking for it because I'm brave. Honestly, I'm not even into urban exploring. My friends are the ones who love it. They treat it like it's the most exciting thing you can do once you turn 18. They buy gear, flashlights, gloves, masks, backpacks. They trade locations like secrets. They get restless if a weekend passes without some new abandoned place to break into. To me, it's always seemed pointless, risky for no real reward. The rush they talk about is just fear with a nicer name, but I still went with them, over and over again, because I've never been good at saying no. That's a pattern in my life. It's not just with my friends. My parents have controlled me for as long as I can remember. The big decisions and the small ones. Who I could hang out with, who I could date, where I could go, what I should eat, what time I should be home. Even when I didn't agree, I never really fought them on it. I told myself it wasn't worth the argument. I told myself it was easier to just go along and wait for things to change. For years, I believed that once I turned 18, they'd finally relax. They'd treat me like an adult. They'd stop trying to steer every part of my life. I was wrong. The first time I suggested doing something different than what they wanted, it exploded into a fight that didn't match the situation at all. It was over something stupid, literally just ice, a small choice at the store, and they acted like I'd attacked them personally. I got yelled at, insulted, threatened. They told me if I didn't like how they ran things, I could get out. After that, I didn't argue again. Not because I agreed, but because it felt pointless. It felt like they didn't want a son. They wanted a person they could control. So instead of fighting, I started pulling away. I avoided conversations by not being around. I stayed out late. I made excuses. I only came home to sleep. That made it worse. If I didn't answer fast enough, I'd get texts that were meant to hurt. Do you even love us anymore? It's a shame our own son hates his family. They said things like that and then acted like they were the victims. My anger turned into sadness, and sadness turned into something heavier. Depression, and then numbness. After a while, the only way to cope was not to feel anything at all. Even when I wasn't home, they tried to control everything. They pushed me toward a college I didn't want. They decided what kind of job was acceptable. They wanted to approve my schedule, my friends, my future. I was exhausted. And still, I didn't resist. Because resisting meant war. And I didn't feel like I had the strength for war. So when my friends texted the group chat early one Saturday morning, before sunrise, I didn't stop them either. My phone buzzed again and again until I finally opened my eyes. I stared at the screen, annoyed and half asleep. It was X, one of my friends, and he told us to meet at his house in an hour. He said he'd found a new place to explore, and he wrote, in all caps, that this one was different. I'd heard that line so many times it barely meant anything. Different usually meant more dangerous, more illegal, or more disappointing than advertised. Still, I didn't want to sit in my house with my parents' mood hanging over me like a storm cloud. And I didn't have the energy to argue with my friends, so I just texted back that I'd be there. An hour later, I was in X's car with the others. Everyone was awake and excited, talking over each other. X was doing that thing he always did, building the story up, making it feel like we were about to step into something legendary. He said the place was in the middle of nowhere, not a little outside town. Nowhere. An empty field you wouldn't even notice unless you knew it was there. And in the middle of that field sat a house. 2 stories, 2 windows, no doors. That part actually got my attention. It sounded too strange to be the usual abandoned building. Then X added a ghost story, like he always had to. He said only 2 people had ever dared to enter. and neither of them came back. I didn't believe that, not even a little. He said it with the same voice he used when he told a joke he wanted people to take seriously. Still, I figured the day might be interesting at least. When we finally got there, I saw what he meant. The field was huge, flat and quiet, stretching out so far it felt like it went on forever. No other buildings, no roads nearby that I could see, no power lines, just grass and wind and sky. And right in the center of it was the house. It looked wrong, not because it was old and falling apart, but because it looked too good. Most places we explored were ruined. Broken roofs, graffiti, stains, mold, trash. This house looked clean. Fresh paint, solid walls, neat corners, like it had been built and maintained, except it had been dropped here without any reason. The only obvious problem was that it had no door. Not a boarded-up doorway, not a locked entrance. No doorway at all, just wall, like the house had been built with the idea that nobody would ever walk into it. We stood there longer than we meant to. It's hard to explain the feeling. The house had a kind of pull to it, like a smell you can't stop noticing. It wasn't even a smell exactly, more like a presence. I felt drawn toward it, but at the same time, my body kept warning me that it wasn't safe. Everyone seemed to feel some version of that. At first, they joked. Then the jokes got quieter. Then people started saying, maybe we should just go. Someone brought up X's story about the two people who never came back, and suddenly, everyone looked ready to leave. But we were a group of teenage guys, and fear doesn't stay simple in a group like that. It turns into a contest. Within minutes, it became less about whether the house was dangerous and more about who was scared. People started pushing each other verbally, calling each other names. The kind of talk where nobody wants to be the first person to admit, yeah, I don't want to do this. Somebody suggested drawing sticks to decide who would go in first. They did it like it was funny. And of course, the way things always went in my life, the attention swung toward me. Y, another friend, held up the shortest stick and immediately pointed at me like he'd found the solution to a problem. Z will do it, he said. This kind of stuff doesn't scare him. My stomach dropped. There was no way I wanted to go in alone. The others joined in right away, chanting my name, telling me to do it, acting like it was obvious. I opened my mouth to argue. I planned to, but the words didn't come. It was like my lungs refused to help me. The same thing that happened at home happened here too. I could feel myself giving in even while I hated it. I sighed, nodded, and walked toward the house. No door meant the only way in was the windows. They were on the first floor, one on each side. I lifted my shoe and smashed one, and the sound cracked through the open field like a gunshot. Glass fell inward, scattering across the wooden floor inside. I climbed through carefully, trying not to cut myself. The interior looked like an old suburban home. Polished wood floors, cream-colored walls, a big dining area, a staircase across from the window. It didn't look abandoned. That was the first thing that truly unsettled me. There was no dust, no spiderwebs, no old smell, no signs of time passing, no graffiti, no trash, nothing out of place. It felt like someone lived here and had just stepped out for a moment, except it was in the middle of an empty field and had no entrance. Behind me, I called out through the broken window, hoping someone would follow. X just waved like it was no big deal. Check it out. He called. Make sure it's not dangerous. I stood there for a second, waiting for them to climb in anyway. None of them did. Of course they didn't. I should have climbed right back out. I should have told them to go to hell and walked away. But disappointment is a powerful thing when you've spent your whole life trying not to cause it. So I took a breath and started walking deeper into the house. My eyes kept scanning for signs of what was wrong. My body kept telling me to leave. Still, I moved toward the staircase, because the upstairs felt like the next step, like that's what you do when you explore a place. That's when I noticed something near the broken window. Where the glass had scattered across the floor, there were dark shapes spreading outward. At first, I thought it was shadow. Then I thought it was some kind of stain. But it wasn't either. It looked like black vines or maybe thick mold creeping out from under the shards. I kicked a few pieces aside and realized the growth wasn't coming from the glass. It was coming from the floor itself, like the impact had woken something up underneath. I stared at it and only managed to whisper, "Strange." Even then, I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was old water damage, some chemical spill, something normal that looked creepy because my nerves were high. I went upstairs. The second floor was different in a way that made my skin tighten. The wood floor became carpet. The cream walls became dark blue. And the layout, hallway, railing, the way the space opened up, felt familiar. Too familiar. It reminded me of my own house. At the end of the hallway, there was a single door. Seeing a door inside a house with no door outside made me uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. Like the house wasn't meant to let you in, but once you were inside, it had plenty of places to lead you. I turned around. I decided I'd seen enough. I was scared, and I didn't care if the guys laughed. I started back toward the stairs. That's when I looked down and saw the broken window again. The black growth had spread. Not only that, but I could see my footprints. Every spot I'd stepped on had a faint outline of my shoe, traced in that same black rot. Like the house was recording where I'd been, like it was reacting to me. A cold rush went through me. "Yeah," I muttered under my breath, "it's time to leave." Then light appeared behind me. The house had no working electricity. I had already checked the switches downstairs. The only light was what came through the two windows on the first floor, and upstairs it was dim enough that corners looked deeper than they should. But now there was a warm orange glow spilling across the floor and lighting the wall in front of me. It was coming from under the door at the end of the hallway. I stood still, staring at it. My fear said leave. My curiosity said look. Curiosity has always been a problem for me, even when I try to pretend it isn't. And that day, curiosity won. I walked down the hallway and put my hand on the knob. When I opened the door, I felt like the air left my lungs. It was my room, not a similar room, not a copy with the same bed. It was mine, exactly. The same mess, the same furniture, the same small details that no one would get right unless they'd been there. The bag of chips I'd eaten that morning was in my trash can. I stepped inside like I didn't trust the floor. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I looked for anything that would prove it was fake. A wrong logo. A photo with a stranger's face. Something slightly off. Nothing was off. "What the hell?" I whispered. I crossed the room and opened the door that should have led into the rest of my house. It did. I moved faster then, like I could outrun the confusion if I checked enough. I ran through the hallway, looked into rooms, recognized everything. My living room, my kitchen. The little things you don't think about until they're copied perfectly. And then I saw it. Grass. At first I thought it was something on the carpet, but as I moved toward my parents' bedroom, I saw it clearly. Green blades pushing up through the floor. Thin at first, then thicker. The closer I got to their door, the more the grass spread, like the house was being taken back by something alive. I pushed open the bedroom door. My parents' room was there, but it was ruined in a way that didn't look like ordinary decay. Nature had swallowed it whole. The carpet was hidden under thick grass. Moss climbed the walls, reaching upward as if it was trying to escape. The ceiling looked wrong, like it was turning into branches and leaves, and their closet door was open. Not just open, inviting, like it wanted me to notice it, like it was the real center of the room. A breeze drifted out of the closet, cool and steady, and it didn't make sense because there were no open windows and no outside air. I took one step into the room. The moment my foot touched the grass, the black rot surged out from under me. It spread across the floor like fire, but faster. Wherever it touched, the grass died instantly. The moss turned black. The leaves above curled and fell. The whole room reacted to me like I was poison. Dead leaves drifted down from the ceiling, and fear hit me so hard I felt dizzy. I understood something then, clear as day. My presence was killing this place. This house had no doors, because I was never meant to enter it. I wasn't meant to see what it hid. And now that I was inside, the house was breaking down around me as if it was trying to erase the mistake. I should have turned around. I should have run back to the broken window and climbed out, no matter what the others said. But the breeze from the closet kept touching my face, pulling my attention. And my curiosity, my stupid, lifelong curiosity, dragged me forward again. I stepped into the closet, and all sense of space collapsed. Instead of a closet interior, I stepped into an open field. A massive, endless stretch of green grass, bright and vivid, rolling out farther than I could see. There was no sky I could focus on, no line where the world ended. It felt like being dropped into a place that wasn't supposed to exist behind a closet door. I spun around. The doorway was still there behind me, like a cut in reality, a clean rectangle leading back into my parents' ruined bedroom. But the field itself was impossible. No walls, no ceiling, no limit. The black rot followed me out. It spread from my feet into the grass in branching veins, killing everything it touched. It moved like a living web, stretching and multiplying, leaving dead black patches behind. For the first time, guilt pushed through my fear. It felt like stepping on something fragile, like breaking something ancient just by being near it. I stopped moving, trying to stop the destruction, trying to tell myself I could still undo it. Then, I heard it. I have no good way to describe the sound because it didn't sound like one creature. It sounded like pain pulled through 100 throats at once, like a man screaming for help, mixed with a dog crying, a cat hissing, a bird cawing. It was ugly and wrong, the kind of noise that makes your body react before you can even think. The ground began to shake. About 50 yards away, the rot stopped spreading as if it had hit a boundary. At the edge of that boundary, the earth bulged upward. Dirt lifted and split apart. Something forced its way out of the ground. It came up thrashing, tearing at the soil, striking at the rot as if it hated it, as if it was trying to stop it from touching its body. And the screaming got louder because the screaming was coming from it. I couldn't move. My legs locked. My skin felt tight over my bones. The thing clawed at itself as the rot crawled up it, eating it. It was destroying itself and being destroyed at the same time. Then it turned and faced me. Its body didn't look like any single animal. It looked stitched together from parts that should never belong together. One leg was human, but mangled, torn open by its own claws, and the rot had eaten into the knee and toes. The other leg looked like a goat's, longer and bent wrong, black mold crawling up it toward the thigh. The torso looked like it had once been a wolf's, but the rot and its own violence had ripped it open so badly that its ribs and guts hung exposed. One arm was almost gone, swallowed by the rot, until all that remained was a sharp piece of bone sticking out like a weapon. The other arm looked bird-like, with feathers falling away and claws chipping from how hard it was striking itself. And its head was mostly bone, the skull of a deer, with antlers above it, empty eye sockets locked on me like it could see anyway. It dropped to all fours. And it ran. It charged toward me with a speed that didn't match how damaged it was. The rot was still eating it, but it moved like it didn't care about pain anymore, like it only cared about me. That broke whatever spell I was under. I could move again. I ran. I sprinted through the doorway back into my parents' bedroom. The room was barely holding together. Everything had turned black, like the rot had sucked the life out of it. The ceiling groaned above me. I heard the creature crash into the doorway behind me, and then the sound of wood and structure giving way. Something collapsed. Maybe the closet area. Maybe the ceiling. I didn't stop to look. I ran through the hallway, through the kitchen, through the living room, and into my room. The whole house was dying as I moved. Walls lost color, as if paint was draining away. Lights seemed to dim even though there were no lights on. The floor creaked and complained, and the house felt unstable, like it might fall apart under my feet at any second. The creature's screams followed me, closer now, mixed with heavy impacts and scraping. It was chasing me through my own home, a broken thing fueled by hate. I reached my bedroom doorway and burst through, and suddenly I was back in the original house again. The suburban copy disappeared behind me like it had been folded away, and I was back in the two-story house in the field. The stairs were in front of me. I lunged for them. The creature slammed into the room behind me, and I heard it hit the hallway like a wrecking ball. I took one step down the stairs, and the wood underneath cracked. The floor gave out. I fell through splintering boards down into a cramped storage space under the staircase. Pain shot through my body as I hit hard. Dust and debris rained down, and above me the house continued to groan like it was coming apart at the seams. I lay there for a second, stunned, thinking, this is it. I did this. I forced my way into a place I had no right to enter, and I brought that rot with me like an infection. Now the house is collapsing, and something is hunting me inside it. I heard the creature pounding toward the stairs. Fear gave me strength. I forced myself up, reached for the storage door, and pushed it open. And that's when the creature dropped down through the broken stair space and hit my leg. It was mostly bone now, rotting as it moved, but its claws were still sharp. Talons like a bird's wrapped around my calf and ripped in. I felt muscle tear. I felt blood spill. I felt something in my leg crack. It yanked me closer. I thought very clearly, I am going to die here. Then I saw something scattered on the floor near my hand. In the fall, I'd knocked a cabinet open. Silverware had spilled out. Knives, spoons, forks. My fingers closed around the nearest thing. A fork. I didn't think. I just stabbed. I drove the fork into what was left of its arm, tearing into the last bits of flesh. It shrieked louder than anything I'd heard, and it let go. Where I'd struck it, the black rot burst up like a spring, surging over the creature's body. In seconds, it was gone. Not dead like an animal dead. Gone like it had been erased. Bone turned to dust. The space it occupied turned empty. I didn't have time to understand it, because the rest of the house started collapsing harder. The walls shook. The ceiling groaned again. The air filled with grit and the smell of old wood. I tried to stand, but my leg wouldn't hold me. It felt ruined. I dragged myself, clawing at the floor toward the broken window. I screamed until my throat burned. Hands grabbed me. My friends, finally, pulling me out through the window I'd broken. Glass cut my arms as I was dragged over the edge, but I didn't care. The moment I was out, the entire house collapsed. Not slowly, not like a normal building. It crumbled as if it had been made of dry ash. In seconds, it fell in on itself and became dust. And when the dust settled, there was nothing left. No foundation, no rubble pile, no broken boards, no evidence. It was as if the house had never existed in the first place. I lay in the grass, gasping, shaking, staring at the empty spot where it had been. Guilt crawled under my fear, because deep down I knew I had triggered it. I had entered a place that didn't want me. And by doing that, I had killed whatever peace existed there, whatever balance it had before I arrived. My friends crowded around me, asking questions, panicking, swearing they were never doing this again. I barely answered. I just kept telling them to get me to a hospital because my leg was destroyed. They looked at me like I was crazy. They said they couldn't see anything wrong. I told them they were lying. I could feel it. I could see it. My leg hurt so badly I felt like I might pass out. I could feel blood. I could feel the damage. But they insisted there was nothing. They drove me to the ER anyway. The doctors checked. They did tests. They looked for swelling, bruising, breaks, cuts. They found nothing. They told me I was fine. I wasn't fine. I still feel it now, as if it never stopped happening. It's like the injury exists in me without existing on me. It doesn't heal. It doesn't fade. I can't walk without a cane or crutches. Some days it feels like my calf is still in that creature's claws. And the worst part is that I can't even prove it. Not to a doctor, not to my friends, not to anyone who wasn't inside my head. To everyone else, it looks like I walked out of an empty field and decided to start limping for the rest of my life. That was the cost. And it changed me. From that day on, I promised myself something, and for once I meant it. I promised I would never let other people make choices for me and then leave me to live with the consequences. Not my friends, not my parents, not anyone. I stopped going along with things just because the group wanted it. I stopped letting silence decide for me. I had the conversation with my parents that I'd been avoiding for years. It went as badly as you'd expect. I lost my home for a while. I lost most of the people I used to call friends. For a stretch, I felt completely alone. But my life is better now. I have new friends who actually respect what I say. I have a girlfriend who loves me for who I am, not who she wants to shape me into. It hurt to rebuild from scratch, but I don't regret it. And all of it, every bit of it, started with that house in the field. So let me come back to what I asked at the beginning. Is an object defined by what it was meant to do? A fork was never designed to be a weapon. Nobody invented it thinking, one day this will save someone's life from a creature that should not exist. And yet, that's what it became in my hand. It did the job. Because it was never the object that truly decided the purpose. And it was never purpose that decided the object. It was the person holding it. In the same way, I used to think my life was defined by what my parents wanted for me, or by whatever my friends pushed me into. I used to think I was just the tool and someone else got to decide what I was for. But I was the one holding the fork. I was the one holding my life, too. And so are you. You hold all the power. Story 4. What if someone offered you everything you ever wanted, plus more? Would you say yes without thinking, or would you back away? What if you met a stranger who seemed to know exactly what was missing in your life? Someone who promised he could fix it all. Someone who could bring back the person you loved most. What would you do? My name is Charlie, and this is the story of how I met the man in black. I'm 28 years old. I live in my parents' basement. Yeah, I know how that sounds. Most people hear that and instantly picture a guy who gave up a long time ago. Someone who never tried. The truth is, I did try. I had a decent life once. I had a job that paid the bills. I had money in my account. I had plans, and I had someone to share them with. Then I lost Layla. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she was my best friend. The kind of person who could sit with you in silence and still make you feel understood. The kind of person who made normal days feel like they mattered. I honestly believed we'd end up together for good. I didn't think anyone could pull her away from me. Then Chad showed up. Chad was the kind of guy people call self-made, even though he looked like he'd never struggled for anything in his life. A tech millionaire. The kind of guy with an office bigger than my whole house, high up in the tallest building in the city. The kind of guy who could buy attention the way other people buy coffee. He offered Layla a life I couldn't match. Cars, fancy dinners, private trips, VIP tickets to whatever band she liked. He didn't have to work for her affection. He just threw a lifestyle at her until it stuck. And with one snap of his fingers, she was gone. After that, I fell apart in a slow, humiliating way. I didn't explode. I didn't make some dramatic speech. I just stopped functioning like a normal person. I lost my job. I went broke. My confidence drained away. My parents got tired of watching me rot in their house, but they also didn't know what to do with me. Sometimes I could feel how much they resented me, like Layla leaving was somehow my failure as a son, too. Like I'd let Chad steal something that belonged to me. These days, my routine is simple and depressing. I sleep late. I watch old reruns of Gunsmoke and The Twilight Zone. I apply for jobs just to keep my parents from yelling at me. I tell myself I'll get it together tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes. One night I couldn't take the basement air anymore. I felt like I was suffocating in my own life. It was storming outside, dark and wet and loud. Normally I would have stayed in, but I needed to breathe. I needed to feel like I still existed. There's a park near our house. Nothing special, just some paths, a couple of benches, trees that looked better from a distance than up close. It was late, around 11. I didn't care what time it was. It's not like I had anywhere to be. I walked through the park while the rain came down lightly. The air smelled like wet grass and pavement. Wind pushed through the trees, making them creak and shake. Everything felt empty, like the city had decided to leave me alone for once. I found a bench and sat down. I listened to the rain tapping leaves, hitting the dirt, ticking against the metal trash cans. For a few minutes, it actually helped. My thoughts slowed down enough that I could pretend I was okay. Then, someone sat beside me. At first, I didn't react. New York is full of people who sit too close. I figured it was just another late-night walker trying to rest for a minute. I was about to stand up and leave when he spoke. "Hello, son. What brings you out here so late?" His voice was deep, with a southern drawl that sounded out of place in the city. It was calm, almost friendly, like he was starting a conversation on a front porch somewhere. I kept my eyes forward and pushed myself up from the bench. "Nothing," I said. "Just walking. Clearing my head. Mind if I join you?" I let out a tired breath. I don't really talk to strangers. And I'm not in the mood. "I can tell," he said. "You look like you could use some help. What if I told you I can help you?" Something about the way he said it made my skin tighten. Not the words themselves, but the confidence behind them, like he already knew what I was going to say. He stood up and stepped closer. He was tall, maybe 6'2", and dressed like he belonged in an old movie. A black trench coat, a black hat, round glasses, the kind that reminded me of Ozzy Osbourne. His skin was pale, too pale, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. When he smiled, I noticed his teeth. They were unnaturally white and sharp. Not cartoon sharp, but sharp enough that my brain quietly filed it under wrong. Then the smell reached me. Dead roses. Not the sweet smell of flowers, but that sour, rotten scent of bouquets left in dirty water for too long. The kind you throw away because the smell sticks to your hands. No thanks, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Have a nice night. I turned to go. And then he said two words that stopped me cold. Auto me, it didn't even make sense, but it hit my spine like a needle. My body froze before my mind could explain why. I turned my head slightly, just enough to look at him. He was still smiling. I know about your situation, Charlie, he said. How you've been broke. How nothing goes your way. How your heart feels cold and empty without your lady. My throat went dry. I don't know how you know my name, I said, anger jumping in to cover fear, or what kind of trick you're pulling, but you need to fuck off. Oh, this ain't a trick, my boy, he said. I help people like you. I could change your life. Think about it, and meet me back here tomorrow night. I walked away fast, trying to play it off. Yeah. Okay, old man. Whatever you say. But when I glanced back to see if he was following me, the bench was empty. He was gone. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. 1 second he was there, and the next second he wasn't. I got home and locked the basement door behind me, even though there was no reason to. My whole body felt cold. The hair on the back of my neck stood up like I was being watched. How did he know my name? How did he know about Layla? I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word. I even considered the idea that my parents had hired someone to scare me into getting my life together. But it didn't fit. My parents didn't have money for that. And even if they did, they wouldn't pick someone who smelled like a funeral bouquet and disappeared into thin air. At some point, another thought pushed its way in, quiet and desperate. What if he really could help me? What if he had a way to fix everything? I told myself I'd just hear him out. That was all. Just listen. Then, I could walk away. What was the worst that could happen? I slept most of the next day. Around 11 again, I went back to the park. At first, he wasn't there. I stood under the trees, feeling stupid and exposed. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. I waited a few minutes, and when nothing happened, I started to think I'd been played. Maybe it had been some weird prank. Maybe my mind was finally cracking. I turned to leave. Ah, a voice said behind me, close enough that I felt it in my shoulders. I see you came back, boy. You must have thought long and hard about what I said. I spun around, heart hammering. He stood there like he'd been there the whole time. I swallowed. Tell me how you know my name. What is this? Did my parents set you up? He chuckled softly. Rest assured, boy, this ain't a game. And no one tells me what to do. I do as I please. I help who I want. He tilted his head slightly. The glasses caught a bit of light, but behind them his eyes looked darker than they should have. I know everything, Charlie. I work in ways you wouldn't believe. I'm right and wrong, good and bad, dark and light, and I can make your dreams come true. I should have walked away. I didn't. How? I asked. Why even help me? I'm nobody. I'm a loser. I have nothing to offer you. He smiled again, slow and patient. You're right. You have nothing to offer me. But there are things I could use your help with. Things I can't do on my own. Like what? I said. I'm not doing anything for free. How can I trust you? How do I know you'll actually help me? All in time. My boy, he said. And trust is an illusion. If you need help, ask. Tell me what you want. I felt the words come out before I could stop them, like they'd been waiting for permission. I want my life back, I said. I want a good-paying job. I want money. I want my girl back. His grin widened so far it made my stomach turn. The sharpness of his teeth showed clearly now, like razors. His eyes, visible above the frames, looked black as midnight, with something faintly red behind them. like a coal barely glowing under ash. "Ah, Charlie," he said softly. "I knew you were the one I was looking for." He stepped back, adjusting his coat like the conversation had already ended. "You'll work for me, and I'll pay you handsomely. As for your girl, she'll be back in time. Go home. In 2 days, meet me here again. We'll talk then." I opened my mouth to argue, but a crack sounded in the trees behind me, like a branch snapping. I turned, and when I turned back, he was gone again. I went home shaking, but my thoughts weren't only fear now. They were hope too, and hope is dangerous when you're starving. Was he real? Could he actually fix my life? Could he bring Layla back? The next morning, my mom woke me up by pounding on the basement door. "Charlie, you have a letter." I hadn't gotten real mail in a long time. If anything came for me, it was usually junk, coupons, fake credit offers, scams. I went upstairs and my mom handed me a red envelope with only my address written on it. No return address. My hands felt stiff as I opened it. Inside were 3 things: a check for $5,000, a note, and a folded letter. I stared at the check for a long time. $5,000. It didn't feel real. My first thought was that it would bounce. My second thought was that even if it didn't, there would be a catch. I put on clothes and walked straight to the bank before my mind could talk me out of it. I deposited the check through the ATM, waiting for the machine to reject it. It went through. When I checked my balance, the money was there. Exactly $5,000. On the way back home, I realized I hadn't even read the note. I'd been so focused on the check that everything else had faded into the background. Back in the basement, I unfolded the note. It was written in red ink. "Charlie, my boy, I hope this envelope finds you. I know it will. I sent you a little gift, a way to show you can trust me like you asked. All I need from you is to open the letter inside and sign at the bottom, then bring it to me when we meet again." Signed, your friend. My heart beat harder as I opened the letter. It was blank, except for a single line at the bottom where I could sign my name. That was it. No terms. No explanation. Just a signature line, like a contract that didn't need words. I sat there thinking about how impossible it was. How did he know my address? How did he get the envelope to my house? How did he give me money that cleared instantly? And yet, the money was real. At that point, I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt like I'd been handed a rope when I was drowning. I told myself it couldn't get worse. It could only get better from here. I signed. When it was time to meet him again, I went back to the park. Same spot. Same dead-looking tree overhead, its branches thin, blocking most of the light. It always felt darker under that tree than anywhere else in the park. This time, he was already waiting for me. As I approached, I held out the signed paper. "I got your envelope," I said. "Thank you for the money. I don't know how I could ever repay you, but I'll do whatever I can." "You see," he said, pleased, "that's why I like you, my boy. You're a go-getter. A man who can do anything he sets his mind to." He took the letter from my hand like it weighed nothing. "I know you'll repay me eventually," he continued. "Did you bring the letter?" "I signed it," I said, "like you asked." "Very good," he murmured. "Very good indeed. You work for me now, and I have something for you to do tomorrow." I frowned. "I work for you? What do you mean? You own a business or something?" He laughed quietly, like I'd said something cute. "Son, I am the business. I'm the owner, the CEO. Everything you see is mine. And now, so are you." I tried to laugh it off. "All right, old man. Don't get weird. If you're paying, fine. Not like you're going to take my soul or anything. All in good time, my boy," he said, and the way he looked at me made a cold line run down my spine. "There's a tall building down in the city," he said. "I'm pretty sure you know the one I'm talking about. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., I want you to stand in front of it all day until 5:55 p.m. After that, meet me back here in 2 days. I blinked. You want me to stand outside a building all day? And you're going to pay me for that? How do you even know what building I'm thinking of? Precisely, he said. I'll be seeing you soon. It'll be a pleasure working with you. And I'm sure you already know which one. Follow your gut. A strange request, but after $5,000, strange didn't matter as much as it should have. The next morning, I got up early and went to the only building that made sense. The one Chad worked in. It was a gray day. No sun, no wind. The streets felt too quiet, like the city was holding its breath. People moved, but not in the usual way. Everything felt off, like a dream where the background doesn't fully load. I stood there all day, exactly like he said. Hours dragged. Nothing happened. I started to feel stupid, like I'd wasted a day staring at glass and steel. When the clock hit 5:55, I finally walked away. I'd gotten a good distance when I heard it. A sound like rain, but heavier. Not water, glass, shattering on concrete. Then a loud, sickening bang that didn't sound like anything living should ever make. People screamed. I turned, and my stomach seemed to turn with the world. It was Chad. I recognized him right away. Not because he looked human anymore, but because my brain knew him and refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. There was no helping him, not from that height. His body hit the ground like something dropped from a butcher's hook. Blood spread. Pieces of him, actual pieces, scattered in a way I still can't describe without feeling like I'm going to throw up again. I stood frozen for one heartbeat too long. Then I ran. I ran all the way home like the street behind me was on fire. When I got to the basement, I barely made it to the trash can before I threw up. My lungs wouldn't fill right. My hands shook so hard I couldn't turn the TV on at first. When I finally did, the news was already covering it. Chad had jumped from his office window. He'd shattered the glass with a chair and jumped. They said police were on their way to arrest him. He'd been stealing millions from the company. I sank onto the couch, staring at the screen. My mind kept trying to find a way to connect this to me. I hadn't touched him. I hadn't even spoken to him. I'd just been there, like the man in black told me. Was that the point? Was I supposed to witness it? The thought made my skin crawl, and I hated myself for another thought that came right after it, quiet and shameful. A part of me was glad Chad was gone. I hated him for taking Layla, but that didn't mean he deserved to die. The next day, I couldn't get out of bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that sound again, felt it in my bones. I told myself I'd never go back to the park. I'd never see the man in black again. I'd take the money and disappear. Then, my phone lit up. Layla. My hands went numb as I answered. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. She said she wanted to see me. She wanted to talk. She didn't sound worried about Chad at all. She didn't even mention him. She told me she'd be on a plane and heading home in 3 days, and we'd talk then. My heart felt like it was trying to escape my chest. This was what I wanted. This was everything I asked for. Money. A chance to try again. That same day, another red envelope arrived. This time, the check was for $15,000. The note said, "You did well, my boy. I had to know I could trust you to do as you're told. Here's a token of my gratitude. Signed, your friend." When it was time to meet him again, I went back under the same dying tree. I told myself I was going there to end it, to tell him I was done. But when I saw him waiting, relaxed and smiling, I felt small again, like my choices didn't matter. The smell of dead flowers was stronger than before. "Ah," he said, There's my favorite employee. I'm very pleased with you, son. You do as you're told. I don't understand, I said. Why did you have me there? Why did I have to see that? I'm grateful, okay? You've given me everything I asked for so far, but I don't want to be part of people dying. He nodded like I was slow. Charlie, it's simple. I needed to make sure you could follow instructions. The rest was up to fate. There are bad people in this world, son. Sometimes they need a little push. I don't care about bad people, I snapped. I just want to be happy. I just want my life back. And you will, he said smoothly. Didn't I tell you things would come back to you? Now I have one more job for you. Consider this the last one for a long time. If you do it right, you can go live that life you always wanted. You can be free. For now, my mouth tasted bitter. Fine, as long as I'm not hurting anyone. After this, I'm done. Yes, yes, he said. Of course. Then his voice turned calm in a way that felt worse than anger. There's a man named Mr. Wallace, he said. He lives in a retirement home. He turned 99 today, and he's still got a few years in him. He's a bad man, Charlie, but he's also smart. He used to be a doctor. He performed surgeries and failed them on purpose. He enjoyed killing innocent people. He leaned closer. I want you to sneak into his room and kill him. I've set it all up. No guards, no cameras, nothing to worry about. You walk in, and it's 6 doors to the right. My stomach dropped. What the fuck, I said. No, I'm not killing an old man. For the first time, the warmth in his face vanished. His mouth curled, and behind the glasses his eyes looked hard and hungry. Boy, he said, voice low, you will do as I say. Remember, you work for me, and it would be a shame if a certain plane doesn't make its way home safe now, wouldn't it? My blood went cold. You leave her out of this, I hissed. I swear to God. He smiled like I'd told a joke. Pray to your God, Charlie. You've already made your deal with me. Now get to work, son. You have till sunrise. And then he walked away like he hadn't just ruined my life. I stood there, shaking. It was already close to midnight. Sunrise was only a few hours away. I texted Layla again and again. I called until my phone warned me I'd tried too many times. No answer. Nothing. I begged her not to get on the plane, not to come home, not to go anywhere. Silence. I walked to the nursing home and sat outside, staring at the building. My head felt full of broken glass. I'd never hurt anyone in my life. I wasn't a killer. I wasn't that person. But if I did nothing and Layla died because of me, I couldn't let that happen. I went inside. The front doors were unlocked, just like he promised. No guard, no nurse at the desk, no voices. The whole place was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like even the building was scared to make a sound. I walked down the hall, counting doors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I opened the door. The room was freezing, so cold I could see my breath. An old man lay in bed, small under the blankets, hooked up to machines that beeped softly. His chest rose and fell in shallow, tired breaths. A monitor showed his heart rate, steady but weak. My hands shook so badly, I had to grip the bed rail to keep from falling. How could I do this? Even if he was evil, even if he'd killed people, who was I to decide he should die? Who was I to pull a plug and call it justice? But Layla's face filled my mind, and my fear turned into a sharp, desperate kind of love. The kind that doesn't think. The kind that just acts. I reached for the life support. And then the old man spoke, barely louder than a whisper. He sent you, he said. I froze. His eyes were open, cloudy but aware. He looked like he'd been waiting. I knew my days were numbered, he whispered. Do what you must. I'm ready. But listen, kid, don't trust him. My skin prickled all over. "How do you?" I started, but my voice broke. I pulled the plug. The old man gasped. His body shook, searching for air that wouldn't come. He made a sound that didn't feel human anymore, and it lasted long enough to carve itself into my memory. He clawed weakly at the sheets. His eyes watered. He looked at me like he wanted to curse me, but didn't have the strength. No one came. No alarms, no footsteps, nothing. When his body finally went still, I stumbled backward and ran out of the room. I kept running until I was outside. Then I ran all the way home. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. When I got to the basement, I threw up again, hard enough that my throat burned. What have I done? I told myself it was over. I did what he asked. Layla would be safe. She would come home. We would start over. I would never see the man in black again. I forced myself to sleep, but it wasn't real sleep. It was nightmares and choking panic over and over. That last whisper kept looping in my mind. Don't trust him. Morning came. My phone buzzed. Layla texted, boarding now. I'll message when I land. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. I begged her again not to get on. But it was too late. I spent the day pacing, feeling like my skin didn't fit right. Every sound outside made me jump. Every time my phone lit up, my heart stopped. In the afternoon, I turned on the TV. A plane had crashed. The news said the pilot was intoxicated. The plane went down and killed everyone on board except one person, a woman. The broadcast didn't show her name right away, but I knew in my bones. It felt like the world tilted. I grabbed my keys and ran. Layla's parents called me while I was on the way, voices broken. They told me she was in critical condition at the hospital. They didn't know if she'd survive. When I got there, the hospital room was cold. Not normal hospital cold, cold in that same strange way as the nursing home room had been, like winter had crawled into the walls. Layla lay in the bed, surrounded by machines. Her body looked wrong, damaged. The doctor told us she could be in a coma for a long time, that her spine was broken, that even if she woke up, life wouldn't be what it was before. I stood there shaking, and the truth hit me like a punch. This is my fault. If I had accepted losing her, accepted my life, worked on myself instead of believing some stranger could rewrite my world, none of this would have happened. Then, like a nightmare making sure you're awake, he walked in. The man in black. Rage exploded out of me. "What the fuck did you do?" I shouted. "How could you do this?" "I did what you asked. You were supposed to leave her alone. We were done." He looked at Layla, then at me, and smiled. "Charlie," he said calmly, "we're never done. And I gave you what you wanted, didn't I? She's here. She's alive. And she's yours to care for now. Forever. Be grateful, boy." Tears poured down my face before I even realized I was crying. "I never want to see you again," I said. "We're done. Leave. Never come back. I wish I never met you." He stepped closer, his dead rose smell filling the room. "Oh boy," he said softly, "we're never done. When I need you again, I will find you. Enjoy this time I've given you, because next time I have much more in store for you." And then he walked out like he'd just visited a friend. That was the last time I saw him for years. Layla is still in a coma. After everything happened, another check arrived, so much money I'd never have to work again. Enough that I could sit by her bed every day for the rest of my life if I wanted. Enough that my parents stopped asking questions. Enough that anyone looking from the outside might think I'd somehow made it. But I didn't make it. I was bought. If you ever want something so badly that you feel like you'd do anything for it, remember this. There is a man out there who will offer you everything, even the world. Please say no to him. Because once you say yes, it doesn't end. I just got another red letter. No return address. The ink looked fresh, like it had been written seconds ago. It said, "It's time, my boy. I'll be seeing you soon, and I don't know how to break free. I can't lose her again. I can't lose myself again." But I already know the worst part. It doesn't matter what I want anymore. He's coming.